Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
Hey Freedom Lovers, this is Dr. Peter St. Pierre with America's Frontline Doctors bringing you today's Daily Dose. So we have some great news. On March 23rd of this year, a federal court has sided with 8,500 federal employees in their case to successfully defend against the Biden administration's illegal and coercive vaccine mandate. So this mandate would have forced all federal employees to receive these experimental injections against their will or suffer the consequences, which would include job loss. Now, we know these drugs don't even work, so this is a terrible mandate.
Good riddance.
Fortunately, the majority of the judges sided with the plaintiffs, and they ruled that the Biden administration did not have the constitutional authority to issue such a mandate. This is a wonderful victory for medical freedom and our constitutional rights to be free from unwanted, unnecessary, and potentially dangerous experimental drugs.
See you later, losers.
The court ruled that the Biden administration cannot force irreversible medical procedures on federal employees against their will. Hallelujah for justice.
How does it feel?
I feel good! Feel incredible!
Ladies and gentlemen, only the truth will set you free. Stay tuned for the next Daily Dose.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast, while Feds for Freedom wins historic settlement on Biden vax mandate. That's the headline this week. And friends, the medical freedom movement has scored huge victories leading up to this month's settlement, from the initial injunctions stopping the vax mandates that they started these cases in 2021 through this one you just saw the Daily Dose spot about. And I like that little cold open because of the entertainment stuff they filtered in there. And I'm sure the copyright people are going to come after me for that. That's public domain, folks, and fair use and all of that good stuff. But anyway, so when a federal court sided with those 8,500 federal employees in their suit against the Biden administration's unconstitutional vax mandate, that was another win. And this has been going on for years, like I said, and that wasn't the end of the fight. And this probably won't be the end of the fight either, even though it's a settlement, but it's critically important and it's a huge victory. The case kept going from 2023, 2024. Now we're in 2025. And the breaking news is that the DOJ was forced to settle with Feds for Freedom just last week. The results of the settlement are the big story today. And we have the executive director of Feds for Freedom with us, and one of the co-founders of Feds for Freedom, Jim Erdman, who's a U.S. Army veteran. And he was going to come in later, but I think he's made it. So we'll have them both here as a panel for the hour. And they're going to discuss the case with us, what the settlement does, and I think even more importantly, what it means for the future of not just federal employees, but the federal employees they represent and of the medical mandates that have been forced on Americans as employees of the federal government and all kinds of other things. Well, Stephanie Weidel is the Feds for Freedom podcast host and the executive director. and she's a mom of three. She is also a singer and a vocal coach. Taught piano before she started teaching her three children at home, and she's married to a DoD civilian employee. Stephanie and Jim, welcome to the Rob Maness Show.
Thank you so much for having us today. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
On.
And I'm sure Jim knows that I'm an Air Force guy, so flexibility is the key to air power. I appreciate you coming on, man. I'm excited about this. I'll get you guys, for both of you, for the whole hour. Well, one of the things I want to do is let you all tell the story of Feds for Freedom, starting with Jim, and why you got involved in it, and a little bit more about your backgrounds. So, Jim, go ahead.
Sure. So for me, I got involved with, I'll go further back. The COVID mess started for me very early on. I think anybody who could read a few studies, could do some of their own investigation, probably saw a few contradictions early on, as early as 2020, where people were saying masks work when we knew they didn't. They were saying things about the virus that, hey, there's no way that this can't be something natural. And there were a lot of really good reasons. And so that created a situation where, the differences in what was being said publicly and what we knew to be true were just too great. So I was working within the federal government. I started seeing this, and there was a very small group of people with whom I worked, who we would sit in my office with our masks off, talking about how we're not crazy. This can't be happening. And as 2021 rolled on, I began asking a lot of questions. It caused a lot of, it upset a lot of people. Questions that seemed sort of natural to me, like, hey, have you looked at VAERS? It looks like there's a lot of potentially harmful effects associated with this mRNA technology. Until finally, it was getting close to the vaccine mandate. We knew that it looked like we were going to get a vaccine mandate. And this was just before the military mandate happened, which I believe was 24 August of 2021.
Correct.
And I started sending questions to Office of General Counsel, Office of Inspector General, EEO. And what happened was my questions got sent around. And before I knew it, I had a group of federal government employees who wanted to go to court if there was going to be a mandate. So on September 9th of 2021, when the mandate was issued in two executive orders, Executive Order 14042 and 14043, the first one, I believe, was the one for contractors. The second one was for staff, or vice versa. We decided we're going to sue. And so I went out, started calling lawyers. And what I'll say is I was a little naive. I didn't expect that when I started calling lawyers, they wouldn't want the case. I just assumed all lawyers were like, well, here's somebody who wants to spend some money on something that may or may not win. But nobody, at least in the DC area, wanted to touch this with a 10,000-foot pole. So the first law firm I contacted was Federal Practice Group, and we are very grateful for the work they are still doing for quite a few federal government employees. Called and got on the phone with them, and they said, well, listen, this is probably going to cost each of you at least, starting off, $5,000 a piece. You need to find some more plaintiffs. And if you do, it might be a little cheaper. And they said, you're in luck. We talked to somebody from the State Department, Marcus Thornton, and Marcus Thornton had his own group of federal government employees who were looking to do the same thing. So long story short, we did hire Federal Practice Group for our first lawsuit, which we filed in the DC district in September of 2021.
Wow.
Our second lawsuit, yep. And so our second lawsuit we filed, that was with Boyd and Gray and Associates in the 5th district in December of 2021. And the third lawsuit, federal lawsuit we filed was in January of 2022 in Florida. And that was also with Federal Practice Group. The case we're talking about today, though, is with Boyd and Gray and Associates. I think before going any further, in addition to litigation, on September 9th, when that happened, we said, hey, listen, we can't each individually sue each individual federal government agency and department. So we are going to have to put together an umbrella organization that we can use as a vehicle to sue the whole federal government. And so that's what we did. And that's how Feds for Medical Freedom got formed. I can't remember exactly when we got through all the legal paperwork to get it listed as a 501c3. But I want to say when we started, there was several hundred of us. By the time we filed our suit in December, there was maybe 6,000 of us. At the peak, though, we did get up to about 9,500 members of Feds for Medical Freedom at the time.
Wow.
So, and again, that was just the litigation. And this is important for the litigation as well. Normally, federal government employees can't sue the federal government. It's not standard procedure. Most of the time you have to go through, administrative processes. So EEO, which is Equal Employment Opportunity, EEOC, MSPB, Merit Service Protection Board, and then there's OSC complaints as well, among other things you can do. But usually you're required to work your way through the administrative processes. And good luck keeping your job during those processes. But most of the time you have to work through that first. And then, and only then, can you take something to federal court. And that was one of the key arguments for this particular lawsuit. So sticking to this lawsuit, and we did organize, I think it was 17 class action EEOs, 14 of which are still working their way through these administrative processes.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And that's really where accountability is going to come in, and we can get to that. Yeah. So
let me bring Stephanie in here because I have to give her a chance to explain how a classically trained and educated at the New England Conservatory in Boston opera singer and vocal coach and piano instructor and mom got involved in this. Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I should not be here. I should not be in this position. This organization should never have been formed. But I saw our first child have a vaccine injury in, I think it was like 2016 when she was 1. And that got me questioning the narrative when it comes to vaccines. And so by the time I had our third child in 2020, we were right there. We were ready to not vaccinate our child, and not continue vaccinating the other ones. And so I think at that point, early 2021, so that was before any mandate, I was listening to a couple podcasts, and it just dawned on me, wow, if they're going to push this and they're talking about holding people's jobs against them, this was January of 2021. I went to my husband and I said, honey, I think your job is going to be held against you. I think they're going to go after you for not taking this. And at that point, he said, that's why they have lawyers. They know they can't do that. That's illegal. So that takes us to 2021. I was homeschooling our 3 children. And I started getting into the signal chats of Feds for then Medical Freedom and started very closely following what they were doing and bringing information to my husband so that by the time the mandate was going to take effect in November. We had already written a religious exemptions together. We had gone after a medical exemption as well for my husband. And we were celebrating right alongside everybody else in 2022, the injunction. And I will say things were getting very tight. It was a very tense time in our house. It was an exciting time because this had never happened before in this country. And it was also an opportunity for me to stand up, and my husband, who's very quiet, an engineer, to stand up and stand his ground. But things got very tight around the time of the injunction. We were ready to move at any time. We had family backing us up, saying we will help you financially if needed. But people need to understand, after the injunction in January of 2022, that was not the end of the road for these federal employees because of their vaccination status. And we're going to get to that in the settlement and why the settlement is so important. But because of that vaccination status, they were barred from their work places. They were coerced into masking and testing. They lost promotions in key positions. They were, some were put on leave with pay or leave without pay. It was a very, very tight, unpleasant, hurtful, chaotic time. So that's why this settlement, which we're going to be talking about today, is actually so important.
Yeah, we got to take a commercial break, Stephanie and Jim. When we come back, though, we'll see a little clip about the results of the settlement, I think is the next one. But I want to get into, since you guys have personally experienced, and you know these people, these 9,500, into some of those negative things that have happened to them over the years, and give you a chance to speak to some of those. We'll be right back with Stephanie Weidel and Jim Erdman of Feds for Freedom. Go check them out. Feds for Freedom, USA, with a 4 in there on X, and you can find their website from there and a podcast, The Feds. We'll be right back.
Information held of vaccination status of federal employees, the religious exemptions that were submitted and never processed by the law. They're supposed to be processed. They were never processed. So religious exemption information, and also the non-compliance labeling that was put on the personnel records of federal employees. So this settlement expunges those records. Now, the default is that your record is going to be expunged. If you do not want your record to be expunged and you want to save it because you're in ongoing litigation, which many people are, you need to opt out. And OPM will submit guidance for this very soon. The second thing that the settlement does is that it prohibits the federal government from using any of that information, the COVID-19 vaccine status, the religious exemption requests, and the non-compliance labeling in any kind of way in hiring, promotions. You cannot use that in any way against a federal employee. And the third thing that the settlement does is it gives a monetary settlement to Feds for Freedom.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and Feds for Freedom I've known about for a long time. I've been following them and sharing their information because they are some of the core members of the whistleblower community that has grown out of the COVID-19 vaccine mandates that the Biden administration put on civilian employees, contractors, military personnel, and have done a great job working with attorneys to bring these cases forward. And that was the executive director, Stephanie Weidel, talking to Children's Health Defense, which is RFK Jr.'s organization that he founded and used to lead. And Stephanie and Jim Erdman is with me today, one of the co-founders of this organization. And Jim, one of the things, those are big things. Those are unusual things. One, it's unusual you're able to talk about this settlement. That's very unusual. Two, it's unusual that the DOJ agreed to the expungement of the records from anything, and then agreed that no adverse actions can ever be taken, and that includes not getting promoted. Using that type of information. And then three, and we've got a clip with Stephanie and Mr. McCotter later in the show that he'll talk about this. I think I kept it in there about you're able to say that they're financially responsible for some things. And that's very rare in the federal government. How did y'all get this done?
I think Steph should lead on this, and then I'll step in.
Okay. Well, let's see. So our injunction was in place until actually spring of 2025. I mean, that's just a couple months ago. But once Trump took office, our lawyer, Trent McCotter, reached out to DOJ and started asking for like a complete win. And they said, well, no, we can't do that because look at all the lawsuits we're going to get, but we will do this for you. And so they negotiated for several months, and it led us to this settlement that was signed on August 7th. But I think it's important for everyone to understand that some of our federal employees are still being retaliated against because of that vaccination status, because of putting in those religious exemptions, and for those non-compliance labeling that is in their personnel records. So I think people need to understand it was not in the past. It is present that this retaliation still happens. So it is a huge, huge deal that the DOJ agreed to settle, to expunge the records, to also put out a policy stating, okay, we're not going to use this against, you agencies cannot use this against the federal employees anymore. Mm-hmm. And also the money, just as I said on CHD, we take it as a tacit, implicit acknowledgement of wrongdoing because of the terms of this settlement.
And I just add a couple other points to that. The other thing that was highly unusual was, the Supreme Court made a decision that said, and again, we won with our en banc hearing in September of 2022. We had two important pieces of case law on the books. One was, hey, the threat of a vaccine mandate is considered legally defined harm in and of itself. That's important because most of these cases that were put into the court system early on were thrown out because they're like, have you really been harmed yet? I mean, this threat thing, is it really an actual harm? Well, this was important. And the other thing that came out of that case law, and again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just I'm a jailhouse lawyer. Federal government employees, as I had mentioned before, they can't usually go directly to court. This would have solidified something on the record that said federal government employees, in certain instances, particularly with constitutional issues, bodily autonomy, they have the right for pre-enforcement challenge. So these were two really big and important things that had come out of the litigation up to that point. We still had not heard the entire merits of the case. DOJ appealed it up to the Supreme Court on the technicality of standing. And they said, hey, listen, we're going to ask that, you dismiss this case because of standing, but also, hey, we decided the pandemic was over, so you might as well just moot the case and erase all those lower court rulings. Now, unfortunately, the Supreme Court is loath to, this is, as I understand it, to step in and step on executive or presidential rights. And so they agree because they said, well, the pandemic is over at this point. We're going to have to moot this. And that was in December of 2023. What I found really unusual was Fifth Circuit sat on it, just sat on it. And we didn't see any movement on that until after January of 2025. So don't know why they sat on it that long, don't care. It gave us an opportunity to step up to DOJ and say, hey, listen, new administration, let's see what we can do here. So that was, I think, unusual. And I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes at the Fifth Circuit and Fifth District, but I'm grateful regardless, even if it was just, pace of business, they didn't get around to it. Don't care.
Right.
I think that also is unusual. And the negotiations that went on for quite some time, back and forth. And to our surprise, this DOJ was surprisingly receptive. Stephanie touched on a few issues on how people are still harmed. Things stay in your record forever. And, believe it or not, there's a Hall file too. If you're in an agency or department, you could just be permanently defined as the kook who didn't want the mRNA. And I count them as good friends these days, but, so that does linger. And we still see that with our membership. There's a dichotomy between what happened with the military and what happened with staff and contract federal employees. The military was a stark difference. Like, people were fired, 8,000 people out the door. I think it was 80 something thousand that had their careers at minimum, they cut short.
Exactly.
It was different for federal government employees. There were some that were fired. That happened. Los Alamos National Laboratory had a whole bunch of people fired, I think, as I recall, a day before the mandate hit, which to me is screwy. But yeah, there were a number of people fired, but it wasn't in the numbers that you saw in the military. But it was different in the sense that, if you were going to PCS or go to another location, you couldn't go. You couldn't go for training. You were singled out, and that has long-standing effects. A lot of loss of really good employees across the whole federal government said, you know what, I've had enough. If they were near retirement, they retired. And even now, there are people who have this on their record, and I'm speaking about someone specifically, actually, who's now facing, because they're under the microscope from before, they're looking for these reasons to make their lives miserable. And I don't know, it looked like Stephanie was about to say something else.
But just a couple points to that. Federal employees would have been fired just like the military had the Feds for Freedom injunction not been in place. I was speaking with Trent, our lawyer, about this, and did a podcast with him. And he brought that up. Military got a lot of attention because so many people were fired. Over 8,000 people. The same would have happened to federal employees. Again, the noose was tightening. We all felt it. At any day, I was awaiting my husband to come home and say, I'm fired. So, but because of that injunction, we actually didn't get as much press because not many federal employees were fired.
The other piece to that too is, Stephanie, I personally, I can't prove it, at least not yet, but I personally believe that if we had not gotten the injunction, boosters would have been mandated.
Agreed.
It would not have been a choice. Being up to date would have been required of everybody. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. The federal government is the largest employer. Sad for our economy, but the federal government is the largest employer, especially if you add in staff employees, contract employees, and military.
Yeah, that's right.
If you can convince that sector of the economy that they all have, not convince, mandate that they have to get a shot, I mean, you're just 2 steps away from figuring out how to do it with the rest of the country.
That's
so
right.
I think that injunction was huge. It was huge because the narrative that you needed your, subscription service shot got shot down. So I'm getting off track, and I didn't mean to interrupt, Steph, but
that's all right. That's all right. We got to take another commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation. I want to ask you guys what you're hearing currently about things like religious accommodation requests as it relates to anything with the flu shot. I'm interviewing a lot of whistleblowers that are getting terminated from the military over the flu shot. I was a commander in 3 different positions and never even once considered terminating somebody for not getting a flu shot. We'll be right back with the leadership of Feds for Freedom, the executive director and one of the co-founders.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
For federal employees was issued September of 2021. We filed our lawsuit on behalf of Feds for Freedom in December of 2021, and we got an injunction, essentially a court order stopping it on a preliminary basis in January of 2022. The government, which was then the Biden administration, immediately appealed, went up on appeal. We temporarily lost, but then won in front of the full appellate court. 17 judges ended up hearing argument in the case. I argued that case. We won, depending on the issue, by different votes. On one issue, we won 13-4. On another issue, I think it was 9-8, but a win's a win. And so we kept our injunction against the employee mandate. The government, which was still the Biden administration then, appealed up to the Supreme Court. But in the meantime, Joe Biden withdrew the mandate. So by this point, we've moved on by quite a bit. Right now, we're probably into 2023. So the mandate's now been withdrawn. And at that point, the government did not even really defend the mandate. It didn't attack the decision below. It just said, well, the mandate's gone, so you don't need an injunction against it anymore. And the Supreme Court agreed and sent the case back down. It took about 1.5 years for it to get all the way back down. That time was really just spent kind of sitting around. It was just typical kind of court slowness, moving its way back to the trial court in Texas, where we had sued. In March of this year, finally the district court says, okay, the injunction is lifted. And he started asking us, the judge, so what happens next? The case itself is still going. It's just the injunction, that initial preliminary stop, that was gone. And that's when we started picking up the negotiations, which I think we'll talk about separately.
Mm-hmm. Well, what does that mean that the injunction stayed in place for so long, even after the
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and we're talking to 2 of the leaders from Feds for Freedom. Stephanie Weidels, the executive director, Jim Erdman is a U.S. Army veteran, but is a co-founder of the organization. It's been on this issue from the very, very beginning. And Stephanie, we have to give kudos to Trent McCotter there, who argued that case to the en banc. En banc is the full appellate. Sometimes, a lot of times when the cases come up, initially they get heard by a 3-person panel, supposedly picked at random. But we all know that doesn't really matter when you're talking about the leftists that are on the court. So the whole appellate court system heard it, and they won again. I think that's important to point out. And the other thing, Stephanie, is that's your podcast, the organization's podcast, the Feds, and that was the first live Rumble broadcast of your podcast. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to show clips from it, in addition to giving Mr. McCotter some airtime there. We were talking before the break, Stephanie, and I asked the question. I told you that military personnel are being separated from the military, the Air Force, Marine Corps, et cetera, for flu shots, even though they're asking for the folks I've interviewed. I think I've done 3 now in the last month. The folks I've interviewed are asking for religious freedom accommodations and those kind of things that are being denied. I'm just wondering, are y'all hearing that from federal employees trying to have a mandate applied over something like a flu shot?
We have not heard that from the federal employee realm, but everyone says things start with the military and trickle down. So yes, we are at Feds for Freedom absolutely calling attention to this, just like you are on your show. It's absolutely unbelievable, especially because we had that Cleveland Clinic study earlier this year come out saying you're 27% more likely to get the flu if you have the flu shot. So it doesn't have anything to do with health. This is all about compliance. And from what I've heard, the military leaders are going for 100% compliance now, whereas before, there was actually some following of the law. Now, on my podcast, I had Casey Dixon on, who is a former JAG, and she was in the room with Pentagon officials back in the spring, and she brought this up. And she said to them, the process is in place to follow, to process people's religious exemptions. You just need to follow the law. And they replied, but what if we get 100,000 people putting in for religious exemptions? And she looked at them and said, so what?
Follow the law. All right. I'm sure she said, I've interviewed her a couple of times. I'm sure she said, well, just follow the law.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
It is amazing. So I think it behooves every American citizen to follow closely what is going on within the military and their treatment of people trying to assert their rights and not get this flu shot.
And I think I just add that the one thing, Stephanie's interviewed a ton of folks from the military, a ton of folks from federal government service. And what we found is the more people we interview, the more people that Stephanie has tracked down doggedly to bring on the program and get information out to the public, we've been able to make a lot of connections with a lot of different people that when you look at the Venn diagram, there's overlap, Alliance Defending Freedom, Children's Health Defense, the Heritage Foundation. They provided a grant to our organization. Folks like Ivan Raiklan or Rob Green, Matt Strickland, they've all come on, and we've been able to build a much larger network that when something comes up, we're hearing about it, usually right when it comes up. So it's been, and I can't forget, many of the FBI whistleblowers, they were part of our organization from the very beginning. Garrett O'Boyle, Kyle Seraphin, a whole host of them. And so we've drawn folks that I'll say they're constitutionally focused. They're focused on what is legal. And, it's only made our movement stronger. And I don't know, that I wanted to make sure we added in that Stephanie has been the glue that brings these people in, and it's helped us. It's helped us really, really marry up efforts.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, this whole movement back to the Constitution being led by federal employees and military personnel, in my mind, as an outgrowth of the COVID situation. So, I mean, it's expanding and has expanded. I've interviewed a lot of the names you guys have just reeled off multiple times over the years. It started with COVID, a lot of it did, but it's extended out into other things. As a matter of fact, I'll just mention now, before I came on the show, Stu Scheller, who was fired from the Marine Corps, put in jail even for calling out the generals and admirals for not throwing their stars on the table over the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, is a senior advisor in Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness office under former retired Brigadier General, now Undersecretary Anthony Tata. And they are having a meeting with 10 folks. I think Casey is one of them. I don't know if Rob Green is one. I know John Frankman is one. You guys have interviewed John too. Mm-hmm. So September 3rd, they're meeting with them to talk about how to get the reinstatement process fixed, because it started as a broken process, as I'm sure you know. If you had Casey on recently, and but that's good news. That's moving forward. The administration wants to do the right thing, right? Is that you guys still getting the sense of that on the civilian side?
We are. And I think I'd add, you bring up a good point. They're trying to work out the process to make it better, to bring people in. This win, to bring it back around to this particular case, OPM guidance is out. There's still a lot that needs to be done by the individual who has been affected by this. If this were a ruling and not a settlement, we'd be in a different situation. But just like everything else in this process, there's more work to do. We got a good win. We got partway there. In fact, Boyd & Gray & Associates got us as close as humanly possible to the finish line. And finish is accountability. So, Feds for Freedom is going to be providing additional information. We're going to be having a town hall to discuss what comes next and how we work this out. But to keep it short and tight, there's going to be some Privacy Act FOIAs that need to go out. This is more than just personnel files. These are lists people have been put on simply because they have deeply held religious beliefs, or simply because they could read a few studies and decided the science didn't cut it. So we have more work to do, and it's not this press a button, we just won. We're going to need people this can include people who were never part of Feds for Freedom before. We're willing to offer up our assistance in making sure that they know what the next step is. You were affected. You want accountability. Here's what we're going to do to get you there. And of course, the EEO process, as horrible as it is, it's what we got. And so we are still focused on helping push these EEO cases through, because that's where we'll start to see some of this accountability. And the ones that I'll say in general, the EEO cases that have the best success rate so far are focused on the retaliation piece and failure to accommodate. As Stephanie alluded to, I believe earlier, the religious accommodation process was purposely broken during this whole mess.
Yeah, and that's something that I wanted to ask you guys about, because it seems like it's a little bit different approach in DOD. What we documented in the court cases, in at least one court case, was that at the senior level in one service, the Air Force, the secretary and the generals all agreed they weren't going to do it. They were going to deny them blanketly, which is against the law, the RFRA law. It's supposed to be an individual process according to that law that was passed. So we have an idea of what things should be triggering accountability. That's one example. You're talking about retaliation. What other things are there? And we'll have to do this after this break here, Jim. But I want to talk to you guys about what does accountability look like here in just a second. We'll be right back with Jim Erdman and Stephanie Weidel of Feds for Freedom. Big win but still a lot of work to do. And I think this is a movement that continues on from a constitutional perspective. It is going to not join with, but be in parallel with and work together with as coalition partners with military members too. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit. Match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
That the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, they're kind of like the HR wing for most of the federal government, essentially all the civilian federal employees. OPM said, we will issue a policy. They said they do it within, I think, 60 days, but they actually did it like the very next morning. They said, we'll have a policy where no one's prior COVID-19 compliance or COVID-19 status or vax status or exemption requests, none of that can ever be factored in to employment decisions. And that doesn't mean just hire and fire, but it can include discipline as well. That's the first part. Second part, OPM also said every federal agency needs to go through and delete those sorts of records from people's personnel files unless they want to opt out, which would mean they keep them in their files. And the real benefit there is down the road, some future administration can't look back through your file and say, oh, you were a troublemaker, like you were a problem 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There just won't be the records there in the first place. So that's the second benefit. The third was they agreed to reimburse part of the expenses that Feds for Freedom had incurred in bringing these sorts of lawsuits. Now, it's different.
Back to Whistleblower Wednesday, and we can't air that enough, talking about the results of the settlement that Fed for Freedoms has won with the Department of Justice here at the federal government level through their years and years of lawsuits. It's a big win, but there's still a lot of work to do. And my guest today is Jim Erdman, a co-founder of Feds for Freedom, and executive director Stephanie Weidel. Guys, we have a live audience. I have a question from the live audience I want to take before we continue on talking about accountability. So we'll go over there. Our hostess is Shell. Shell, go ahead with that question.
Go ahead, Nathan.
Hey, thanks. Good afternoon, Colonel and Feds for Freedom. I'm noticing here on X, there has been the weaponization of community notes, but also now Grok is touting the talking points and ignoring any harms done and stating that so many X amount of lives were saved, so the vaccines are a plus. And I'm just curious if there's any energy in combating that way with smarter minds, that way they're not creating any type of standing or fabricated citations to justify continuing all of this. Thanks.
I think, and Stephanie, you could help me, the beginning part of the question cut out, but I think I understand what you're asking. You're asking, hey, listen, there's a whole lot of scientific misinformation that was pumped out that they called information, but was actually exactly the opposite. And those lies continued through to today. And is there any energy to try and fix that particular issue? I'm going to speak about what's happening across the federal government first, and then talk about what Feds for Freedom might be able to do. I do know 100%, because we have a little peek behind the curtain, but I know that the federal government is attempting to make corrections. The federal government is gigantic. and it's hard to move things. I think people are forgetting that we're in the first 6.5 months. Is it 6.5 months of a new administration? Maybe 7 now.
That's right. Yeah.
More action has occurred in 6.5 months than I think in any other administration. I don't know. I haven't been engaging. In fact, I'm generally, don't really pay attention to it until COVID started. And so what I'll say is there is a lot of work being done behind the scenes, but there's very few of the truly constitutionally minded federal government employees that can be relied upon to help move things forward. And so it's moving. It's moving forward. In terms of what Feds for Freedom can do to combat that particular scientific piece, the scope of Feds for Freedom is to help federal government employees. If federal government employees come to us and say, hey, listen, we need help doing something along those lines, I guarantee you we will do our best. If we can't do it, to reach out to the partners we've made, whether it's Children's Health Defense, Alliance Defending Freedom, or the contacts that we've made within the legislature who seem predisposed towards helping. We're going to do everything in our power to help. I know that's not a full answer, but Steph?
Yeah, we actually do have some legislation like a National Medical Freedom Act. We have Stop Playing God Act that looks at like geoengineering and mRNA. I'm sorry, not geoengineering, gain of function and mRNA. Though geoengineering needs to be fixed too, but mRNA and the gain of function research to look at banning that. So these are just a couple pieces of legislation that we have. So it's our focus. The focus of our organization is protecting Americans from government overreach and holding the government accountable. So we do have some pieces of legislation, but I did also want to say, we are an organization that wants to expose wrongdoing, advocate for federal employees and average American citizens who want to stand up for their constitutional freedoms, to support the federal employees, and to educate. And I wanted to put in a plug before we run out of time for our conference on medical freedom and the Constitution, protecting yourself from government overreach, on October 10th and 11th, 2025 at Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia. Can't speak. But this is an opportunity to talk with Garrett O'Boyle, the FBI whistleblower, about what he saw, how he was hurt for actually bringing the Constitution to his supervisors and saying, hey, you're not following this. But Twyla Braze from Citizens Council for Health Freedom, Alex Newman, investigative journalist, these and our own federal employees, just educating Americans on what happened during COVID, what continues to happen, and what people can do about it. So, anyway, I thought I would put a plug in for our conference. If you're in the Northern Virginia or the Virginia, West Virginia, or Maryland areas, you might want to sign up for that.
Say those dates again.
October 10th and 11th. It'll be a Friday afternoon and all day Saturday.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. We'll make sure that folks are aware of that too. Make sure you share stuff with me, and I'll get it out through my channels too. To get a little bit of that question, that's why I published an op-ed in Stars and Stripes yesterday about keeping artificial intelligence out of the presidential nuclear command and control decision-making process. The caller mentioned Grok spouting the medical disinformation because that's the majority of its sources when it scrapes the internet looking for sourcing to answer a question. The majority of it is disinformation based on about the shot, about the adverse reactions, about the loss of jobs. And it even says sometimes it'll say, yeah, people have been held accountable for wrongdoing, but I don't think so, guys. Tell us, what does accountability look like individually to leaders that have broken the law or acted unethically in this whole process from your perspective?
I'm going to speak. I'll speak first, Steph.
Yep.
For me, accountability, and you asked about individually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about the obstacle to individual accountability. Justice delayed is justice denied. And the process for getting to accountability takes so long that, for example, and I'm talking in general terms, and again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a jailhouse lawyer, but the amount of time it takes to get through these processes, well, usually when you're talking about violations of regulations that fall under the Administrative Procedures Act or governance in the federal bureaucracy, it's like 5 years. So if you can delay that process longer than 5 years, a lot of the accountability you want, you're no longer going to be able to get if you can't push that through faster than 5 years. So that is an obstacle. So for me, the accountability starts with admission of wrongdoing. I'm generally conservative in my belief. That's not a political belief. That's a belief in, I believe we should conserve our institutions, and we throw them out at our peril if we don't know what replaces them. There are good people who made mistakes, and I think there's space for trying to re-educate folks who have strayed a little too far from the Constitution. And we need those people. We need those people who know what they're doing within the federal bureaucracy. Not all of them, but definitely some of them. So for me, accountability is at first an admission of wrongdoing. It has to be just like Secretary Hegseth. It was one of the bravest things I've seen in a very long time. And I found it was, for a variety of reasons, it's brave.
When he declared the mandate was an unlawful order.
Yeah, it was administrated unlawfully. That's brave. And that's the first step toward accountability. I do want to see people who were directly involved in administering this with full knowledge that it was illegal. They got to go. That's beyond the pale. They have to.
It's pretty simple. I mean, Stephanie, we'll come to you for the last word here before the show ends. But it's simple to me. If you broke the law in the implementation of administering this vaccine mandate on a civilian federal employee, you got to be held accountable in some way, some meaningful way, whether it's you're terminated or you get a letter of reprimand, or you get demoted. Something has to happen, or the institution won't recover, will it?
Right.
That's right. That's exactly right. I think I look at my husband's command at his base, and I think even in the EEO process, the commander was never investigated. Even though he was named, he was never investigated. That's the first thing that needs to be happening here. And we know that that commander could have chosen to look at my husband's appeal and choose otherwise, instead of barring him from his job, keeping him home, keeping him from promotions. That didn't need to happen. He could have chosen otherwise. I will say that this settlement, it does not keep mandates from happening again, vaccine mandates from happening again. It does not inherently it does not inherently bring accountability. There's still work to be done. But what it does is actually give a quiet acknowledgement that, yes, there was wrongdoing that happened here. We would love to have a loud acknowledgement that the federal employee vaccine mandate was wrong, just like Hegseth did for the military.
Yeah, and I think that's why I know you guys, from everything I've read, are not you're not withdrawing from the effort just because you got a settlement in this one case. And that's the reason why we can't withdraw from the effort, because if we don't seek accountability both institutionally and individually when people broke the law, obviously, or acted unethically, I mean, there's got to be a level of accountability, even down to what I always say is even down to the platoon sergeant level of leadership. If things were done wrong, in an egregious way that deprive people of their civil rights. And in this case, it was mostly religious rights. But I've seen things, like people being sequestered out, like put in encampments separately, and all kinds of stories that are factual.
True beauty isn't applied. It's nourished from within. Bella Grace Elixir, a luxurious, scientifically crafted blend designed to restore radiance, vitality, and strength at a cellular level. At the heart of Bella Grace Elixir lies cat's claw, a powerful herb from the Amazon known for its ability to control inflammation.
And airs every Tuesday at 3 a.m. But you can find everything that's going on with Feds for Freedom at fedsforfreedom.org.
Well, thank you all very much. God bless you. Keep up the fight. We appreciate it. And tomorrow is Truth Thursday. Will Thibault of the Claremont Institute will be talking about his fight to end wokeism in the U.S. military. Of course, I look forward to that because that's right in my wheelhouse. I'll see you then.
True beauty isn't applied. It's nourished from within. Bella Grace Elixir